I was babysitting for a family who lived in a remote area. It was a stormy night. As I settled in to watch over the children, I couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy. The house was large and remote, and the storm outside was growing more intense by the minute. Nevertheless, I focused on keeping the children calm and comfortable. I read them stories, played some games, and even made them a light snack. As I was putting the kids to bed, I could hear the storm outside getting worse. The wind was howling, and the rain was pounding against the windows. The children were scared, and I tried to comfort them by reading them a story and singing a lullaby. Once the children were asleep, I decided to check on the house. I went from room to room, making sure that all the doors and windows were locked. As I was finishing up, I heard a knock on the door. At first, I thought it might be the parents returning home early. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw a man I didn't recognize. He was tall and thin, with greasy hair and a scruffy beard. He was wearing a dirty raincoat and carrying a large backpack. I hesitated to open the door, but the man looked harmless enough. He said he was hiking in the woods and had gotten caught in the rain. He asked if he could come inside and wait out the storm. I felt uneasy about letting a stranger into the house, but I didn't want to be rude. I told him that he couldn't come inside but could wait on the porch until the storm passed. He seemed disappointed but didn't argue. As I was walking back to the children's bedroom, I heard the man knocking on the door again. He said that he was getting cold and wet and asked if he could come in just for a little while. I felt sorry for him and considered letting him in. But then something in my gut told me not to trust him. I remembered the parents' instructions and knew that I couldn't take any chances. I told the man that I was sorry, but I couldn't let him in. He became angry and started to bang on the door. He shouted at me to let him in, and I could hear him trying to force the door open. I ran to the phone and called the police. They told me to stay on the line and stay put. The man continued to bang on the door, and I could hear him shouting and cursing. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. I thought about running out the back door with the children, but I didn't want to leave the house and the man to be alone with the police. But then I remembered that the parents had a panic button in their bedroom. I ran to the bedroom and pressed the button, hoping that it would alert the police. I knew that the man would hear the alarm and might try to run away, but I couldn't take any chances. As I waited for the police to arrive, I could hear the man trying to break down the door. I could feel my heart racing and my hands shaking. I knew that I had to stay calm and keep the children safe. Finally, I heard the sound of sirens outside. The police arrived quickly and took the man into custody. They told me that he was a wanted criminal who had been on the run from the law. They also said that he had a history of breaking into houses and stealing valuables. I was shaken by the experience and couldn't wait for the parents to come home. When they arrived, I told them everything that had happened. They were shocked and grateful that I had followed their instructions and stayed safe. After that experience, I never took babysitting for. I was hired to babysit for a family who lived in an old, creepy house on the outskirts of town. As soon as I arrived, I felt uneasy, but I brushed it off as nerves. The parents seemed nice and normal, and the kids were sweet and well-behaved. As the night went on, I started to hear strange noises coming from upstairs. At first, I thought it might just be the wind rattling the old windows, but the sounds were too distinct. It sounded like footsteps and whispers. I went to investigate, making sure to bring a flashlight with me. As I climbed the stairs, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The air was chilly, and I could see my breath in front of me. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw that the door to the children's room was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, trying not to make a sound. As I peered inside, I saw that the toys in the room were moving on their own. The dolls were swaying back and forth, and the toy cars were rolling across the floor. I was frozen in fear, not knowing what to do. I had never experienced anything like this before. My mind raced with thoughts of ghosts and spirits. Was the house haunted? Suddenly, I heard a loud thud from downstairs. It sounded like someone had broken into the house. I knew that I had to act fast. I quickly grabbed the children and ran out of the house, making sure to lock the door behind me. I called the parents and told them what had happened. They were shocked and told me to stay put while they called the police. As I waited outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I could feel a cold breeze blowing through the trees, and I could hear the sounds of rustling leaves and creaking branches. When the police arrived, they searched the house but didn't find anyone inside. They said that it was probably just a stray animal or the wind causing the noises. But I knew what I had seen and heard. It wasn't just my imagination. The parents came home early, and I told them everything that had happened. They were understanding and even apologized for the spooky nature of their home. They said that they had experienced some strange things themselves, but had never seen anything quite like what I had described. From that night on, I was never quite the same. The experience had shaken me to my core, and I couldn't help but feel a bit spooked whenever I passed by the house. I wondered what had happened in that house before the family had moved in. Had something tragic happened that had left a haunting presence behind? Despite my fears, I continued to babysit for the family. Over time, the strange occurrences in the house seemed to lessen. Perhaps the ghosts or spirits had finally moved on. In the end, the experience taught me to trust my instincts and to stay alert in any situation. It also made me realize that there are some things in this world that we may never fully understand. I was babysitting for a family who had an extensive collection of creepy dolls. The dolls were arranged on shelves and in glass cases throughout the living room, and their glassy eyes seemed to follow me wherever I went. As soon as I walked into the house, I felt a chill run down my spine. The parents had warned me about the dolls and had even joked that they were haunted. At first, I had brushed it off as a silly superstition, but as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. I started to hear strange noises coming from the doll's room. At first, it was just a faint rustling sound, but then it grew louder and more distinct. It sounded like the dolls were moving around on their own. At first, I tried to ignore it and focused on keeping the kids calm and entertained. But as the night wore on, the noises grew more and more unsettling. Finally, I decided to investigate. I made my way to the doll's room, trying to keep my nerves in check. As I opened the door, I was hit with a wave of cold air. The dolls were all in their places, but I could swear that their expressions had changed. Their once serene faces now appeared twisted into sinister expressions. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I realized that something wasn't right. Suddenly, I heard a phone ringing. It was an old-fashioned rotary phone that I hadn't noticed before. I hesitated to answer it, but my curiosity got the better of me. As I picked up the receiver, I heard a raspy voice on the other end. It whispered, "I'm watching you." I was terrified and dropped the phone, my heart racing. I ran to the children's room, grabbing them and holding them close. I could feel my hands shaking as I called the parents to come home immediately. I told them what had happened, and they promised to be home as soon as possible. As I waited, I could hear the sounds of movement coming from the doll's room. It sounded like they were whispering to each other, plotting something sinister. I could see their shadows on the walls, and their eyes seemed to glow in the dark. When the parents finally arrived home, I told them everything that had happened. They seemed concerned but not surprised. They said that they had never experienced anything like that with the dolls before but had heard stories of strange occurrences in the past. I could see the relief on their faces as they took the dolls and locked them away in a closet. They apologized for not taking the dolls more seriously and promised to get rid of them as soon as possible. From that night on, I refused to babysit in that house again. The experience had left me shaken and wary of creepy dolls. I couldn't help but wonder what had possessed the dolls and who had been on the other end of the phone. In the end, the experience taught me to always trust my instincts and to stay alert in any situation. It also reminded me that there are some things in this world that we may never fully understand. Perhaps the dolls had been cursed or had been possessed by malevolent spirits. Whatever the case, I was glad to be out of that house and away from those creepy dolls.